To get started today, what I want to do is talk a little bit about how Forio Epicenter works and what the platform does. And then what I'm going to do is show you some examples of some finished simulations that were developed on Forio Epicenter. And then finally, what I'm going to do is take you through how to build a interface on Forio Epicenter using Powersim. All right, let's get started. So Forio Epicenter is this platform. It's a computational platform for hosting models server-side, and you can host a Powersim model server-side with Forio Epicenter, then create interactive interfaces, and then share those interfaces on web and mobile. So most of the interfaces that are built using Forio Epicenter are done on the web, so they're shared online, but you can also build iOS or native Android applications if you want to using Forio Epicenter. But probably 95% of the interfaces that are developed are run through the browser. And to illustrate that, what I thought I could do today is show you some examples of some simulations that were developed this way. And the first one I thought I would share with you is this Tesla Powerwall simulation. It was developed with Powersim. And this is a style of interface that's known as a calculator. So it's kind of a simulation style calculator. The purpose of this particular simulation is to look at how many power walls you would need to install in your house to support solar panels, for example, that you might have on your roof or something like that. And a Tesla Powerwall, if you don't know, is a battery essentially that you would put in your house, and it would get charged by the solar panels during the day while the sunlight, and then it would provide power to the house in the evening when there's no sunlight available. And so this tool is really around figuring out how many power walls you need to install and what your energy consumption would be like during that time. So you start by looking at your house, and there's some information that's available in terms of energy consumption over time. And one of the things this tool allows you to do is experiment with which appliances you have and how you use your appliances during the day. So what you can see here is there's fridge and kitchen equipment, TV, water. There's an electric car. If you have an electric car, you could have that included, and that can consume a lot of power if we leave that on or turn it off. I'll turn it off for now. You can decide the number of people in your house, and of course that's going to influence the energy consumption. And then you can also look at details for how you consume energy with these drawable line graphs. And what's interesting about this is it provides sort of a consumption pattern over a 24-hour period, depending on what kind of device you're using. So let's look at TV, for example. And here we can see sort of a pattern of TV usage throughout a day, where there's some TV usage, I guess, in the morning before, a family, for example, goes to work, and then it starts up again around, 5 to 7 and kind of continues on until later on in the evening. And if you don't have that style of energy consumption for your television, you can change that. You could go in here and, draw a new pattern that you think is more, representative of what you personally do for, for energy consumption for, for a TV in your household. So that's the basic idea. So I'm going to go ahead and put this assumption in, and I'll continue. And then the next piece of this is trying to locate where your house is and set the latitude. And latitude is influences the amount of energy that you're going to get from solar panels on your roof over time. So what's nice about this tool is that it kind of comes up with a location. So I can put in, other locations here. Let me think of a good location in San Francisco. We're in San Francisco right now, so that's kind of why we're seeing this map. But if I put in, 800 Post Street here in San Francisco, it's going to give me a view of 800 Post. And then what I can do is zoom in on it and kind of see, what that particular building looks like and determine if I could put solar panels on here. And while I do that, what happens is over here on the right, the latitude updates. And that's kind of a nice feature. And that shows some of the power of having an online application where you can integrate other kinds of tools to provide information that's going to be useful to your end users. So here we can see latitude information provided to the Powersim model that comes from Google Maps, essentially. So that's kind of how those are integrated together here. And, there's more to do here. We look at the investments that can be made over time, and kind of a critical piece of this is looking at how the batteries are going to provide power over time here, what I might do is look at, well, what if I had fewer batteries in my house? What would happen? And if I did that, I would run out of power by 11 p.m. So I get that fully charged, kind of 3 hours into the orange line here is the daylight provided during the day, and it kind of peaks here at looks like about 1 o'clock during daylight savings time. And then it will diminish, and I guess right now the sunset would be around 7 p.m., something like that in this area that we've put in. And, I can look at what would happen if I had more or fewer batteries and sort of what that pattern might look like over time and decide like what's the right number of Powerwall units to install. And then from there, I can look at different days. I can look at least sunny day or sunniest day and look at what the differences in pattern might look like for those, just to kind of think about what the solution would look like. And then also look at benefits over the year and how that can change based on the amount of sunlight that's provided over the year in the region that you're in. And then finally, it provides sort of this payoff. And this style of simulation is a calculator. It's used for thinking about a problem and calculating an answer, and it can be run multiple times. So this is one style of simulation that can be built. Another type of simulation is a tool for doing run comparisons, which is typically done for scenarios where you're running your simulation to the end for a particular scenario. And an example of that is this MIT Driving the Future Alternative Fuel Vehicle simulator. I guess I'm on the alternative fuel kick today. I didn't realize that until just now, but I have this other simulation out here that's showing this. And what I can do is play this simulation out and make some initial assumptions about my vehicle platform and energy prices and things like that when I think different kinds of vehicles are going to become popular. And then what I can do with the tool is experiment with running this over time. So I can go in and set different policies. Like I can set the number of hybrid electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids and battery electric vehicles over time for tax incentives and set tax things and OEM strategies and so forth. And then I can, based on that strategy, I can go ahead and run it out over time and then see, for example, how that affects new vehicle sales over time. And what it's showing is that, in this particular scenario, and this is for a US market, that hybrid electric vehicles exceed the adoption or the sales of gas-powered vehicles in around 2042. So that's the point where there's kind of a crossover between these two. And if I want, I can go back then and rerun with a new scenario. I can go back and say, well, what would happen if my incentives were different? I have to restart to do that. So I can go back here and say, what if my incentives were different? Or what if I offered, some subsidies to OEM manufacturers for this kind of thing, and then rerun with a new scenario and compare that and offer this capability of kind of comparing one scenario to another. And this is another format that we call this a run comparison. It's also sometimes called a scenario comparison style simulation that can be built. And this is frequently used as a tool that we see customers of Epicenter using this as a way of selling insights, essentially, maybe selling this as a subscription to end users who maybe have analyses that they need to do, and they want to use a Powersim model for providing that analysis. A third example of a type of simulation that can be built with our platform is our games. They can be either multiplayer or single player game-like simulations that cover a variety of topics. Sometimes they're on public policy issues like we see here. Sometimes they're on business issues and things. And one of our big customers for our platform is Harvard Business School. And I just thought I'd link here to kind of show some of the examples of simulations from Harvard that that have been built, and they have, I don't know how many in total in their catalog now, but well over 50 different simulations. And these are all hosted on Epicenter. And what Harvard does with these is resell these in the same way that they sell case studies to other business schools. So that's another format for it, and it's a different style of simulation. And for today, what I thought I would do, just to kind of illustrate that a little bit, would be to show a simulation from this catalog that is a multiplayer game and kind of illustrate how multiplayer games work within Epicenter. This is a system dynamics simulation, and let me start actually, and what I have is a login here for one of the users for this simulation. It's a marketing simulation called the value proposition, and it's on a topic of surgical robotics. And This is a 4-person game, so 4 people play competitively in the simulation, where they make decisions, and their decisions kind of influence the others in terms of the market share, and the 4 competitors together kind of make up the entire market. So we have person 1 through 4 for the market here, and then we also have person 5, who's the facilitator. So let me show you what a facilitator page looks like here. So I'm logged in as a facilitator, and I can go to facilitator simulation setup, and I can see that 4 students are registered for my demo account today. And I can go ahead. What I'm going to do here is log all of them in. So I'll have login Forio user 1, and let me switch to the next one, which is Forio user 2. So what I'm doing here is logging in as if I were different people. And Forio user 3, and then finally Forio user 4. So we have all 4 people now logged in. Let me go back to the facilitator account. What I'm going to do is reset this run. I'm going to reset the current run. And this simulation happens to have a timer set up for it. So even though, as far as I know anyway, Powersim Studio doesn't have a timer kind of built into it, you can have timers that work with the platform to kind of control the pacing of a simulation for games and for other things. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the simulation so it's ready for play. And then if I go to a particular user here, I can see results and see how they've advanced over time here. And one of the things I can do is look at different reports. So here's a report around different attributes for my product, my robotics product. You can see surgical economics, for example, procedure price, the precision of the robot, the operating room flexibility, and so on. And then I can also look at market share and how that might be changing over time, and my category penetration. And what I do as a end user in this is set things up, like maybe I change the price of my robot. I can make investments in R&D. I can maybe do professional training for surgeons who might be using it. And then I can decide on what my strategy is, my business goal overall, and submit. And now what it's doing is it's waiting for the other players to submit their decisions. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and submit a decision for player 2, and I'll do the same for player 3. Here's player 3. I'm going to set up a business goal for them. And finally, I have player 4. And you can see right now we're in year 1. So for player 4, what I'm going to do is go ahead and set this. And when I submit the last player, all the players in the simulation have been submitted together, and the simulation will advance. So let's watch that now. So I hit advance for the player 4, and I'm say, yes, I'm sure. The simulation has now advanced to year 2. I see new results, and I can see, in my reports how things have maybe changed over time, and maybe a little bit about how market share has changed. So now the player who's Lamar has a larger market share than the other players. That's not surprising given the fact that Lamar was the only one who did anything in this particular game, but it gives a little bit of sense for how this works. And then there's, of course, like I say, the facilitator page, which can control the simulation and look at, for example, which students are registered and what group they're in and things like that. And this can apply both to single player simulations, but also multiplayer like we're looking at right now. Okay, so that's a quick explanation of the types of sims, or sort of exploration of the types of sims that can be built with Epicenter. And what I want to do next is show you how you can build these simulations using Epicenter on your own. And we've built this platform. This is actually our 3rd generation platform. We've had a couple other generations of the platform that were structured differently, and this is sort of based on a modern hosting technology. And what we've learned from the previous generations is that there's really 2 different types of people who use this kind of authoring and hosting platform for building online simulations. And one of them can be kind of represented by this fellow. So this is a person who is a kind of lone modeler. And this person is not me. It's not a picture of me, but this would be like me if I were building simulations, in the sense that I'm a modeler, but I'm not somebody who does web development. I know a little HTML, but I'm not an expert. Certainly, I know very little JavaScript. I know a little bit of programming, but I'm not an expert. And I'm also not a web designer. I don't do UX UI design or anything like that. And we want to be able to support this type of person with the platform. So we want someone who just knows modeling, just knows how to use Powersim to be able to build simulations with the tool. In addition, though, there's another type of user, and this is kind of like the Harvard group, I suppose, where you have a team of people who are coming together to collaborate to build a simulation. And here we would have someone who's maybe a full-time professional UX UI designer, maybe someone who's an instructional designer as well. You would have a modeler, a Powersim modeler that would be available to build the model that provides the simulation logic and the simulation outcomes. You'd have a web developer who's creating a unique web interface based on what the UX or UI designer has created. And if you're releasing this to, say, hundreds of thousands or even millions of people, you'd have QA that checks it on different browsers and things like that. And because you have all those people involved, you'd likely have a project manager. And so the platform also supports this type of group, this type of collaboration among authors with different capabilities. So we can do, an individual can do everything on their own and create a particular kind of interface. And a group like this of, with different capabilities can also come together, work within Epicenter to build high production value simulations that are being resold, for example. And the way we do that is we have this stack of technologies that are available, and you can kind of enter the stack based on what your own capabilities are. And so this is sort of a picture of the user interface technology stack that we have available. And it starts at the very top with these interface templates. These interface templates are template-based tools for creating web pages for a web application or a simulation that's using a Powersim model. It's similar to Wix or Squarespace, if you're familiar with those tools, where you can kind of drag and drop elements to create an interface. And you can go below that level to Flow.js, which is kind of an HTML markup language. So if you know a little HTML and you want to do more custom work, you can use Flow.js for doing that. And then below that is Epicenter.js. This is typically used by professional web developers who are familiar with frameworks and libraries that work in JavaScript, like React or other sorts of JavaScript frameworks that are out there. And then you can even go below that to the aggregate APIs and base APIs that are available that Epicenter provides, and that's often used for integration with different types of platforms that are outside of HTML, for example. As you move up the stack, things get easier to build. So it becomes much easier. It's sort of more accessible, for example, or easier for a lone author to build something. But there's a trade-off, and the trade-off is as you go up the stack, you have less flexibility. So if you're willing to, and sometimes that lack of flexibility can be an advantage for a person who's doing solo authoring and development. There are kind of good templates that are provided that make it easier to kind of structure things. And if there's a group out there that was doing web design and they want to do things on their own and kind of configure everything themselves, they can drop down to one of these lower levels. So that's basically how the stack works. All right, so I want to illustrate a little bit of that. And because we have kind of limited time today for how we're going to be, for our hour for constructing a simulation, I'm going to focus on the top of the stack and really focus on the interface templates as a method for building simulations. And let's start that by taking a look at a Powersim model. So here is a simple model that we put together in advance today for illustrating output. And of course, this model isn't the important part. All of you who are attending build your own models, and you're experts on model building. So this is the part that's kind of, in some sense, least interesting. But the point is that here we have a basic model that we can use as sort of an example to share today. And this is a diffusion model, if you're familiar with that. I mean, it's a popular type of system dynamics model, and it's focusing on new sales for a company, and the new sales are contributing to the installed base over time. And some of that installed base purchases more in the future, and that contributes to total sales. So total sales is a summation of new sales plus repeat sales. And let's, for the sake of illustration today, let's imagine this is an electric bike company. So we're going to talk about this as if it were an electric bike company, and we have some new innovative electric bike that we're producing. And what the user does in this is they set up contacts per month and purchase probability, and that's kind of how they influence the outcome in this model. And this model could be used in different ways. It could be a multiplayer game. It could be a run comparison where we set the contacts per month and the purchase probability and run it out to the end and compare them one to another. or it could even be a calculator. I suppose we could use it that way as well. So, but in this case, we're going to, I think, try to build kind of a turn-based game out of this to kind of illustrate some of the features, but any one of these would apply to it. All right, so let's go next to taking a look at Epicenter. And here I am in my Epicenter account. I'm in a team-based account today because I want to illustrate some of the team-based features that work with Epicenter. And my first step for creating a project within Epicenter is just click on the Create a New Project link here. And what this does is let me set up a new project. So in this case, I want to set up a new Powersim simulation. I'm going to put in a name. I'm going to call this my electric bike company. That's going to be the name of my my project. And what you can see here with the project ID is that I'm creating a URL-friendly version of the project name. So here I use caps and spaces, and in the URL that I'm creating here, you can see the caps have been, everything's in lowercase, and the spaces have been replaced by hyphens. And I have 3 different ways that I can provide access to this simulation. I could do public, which means anybody who goes to the URL that's going to be created from this can access the simulation. I can go to private, which is only I, as the simulation author, can access it. And sometimes people ask, well, why have private? If you're building a web simulation, why would you want to have a private account? And the reason is that while you're developing it, you don't want other people to see what you're working on. You want to finish it first, and then share it. So you can start with private and then move it to public or authenticated for later. And then the third category here is authenticated. And what that's used for is requiring end users to log in. We're going to use that today because I want to illustrate some of the authentication features that are available within Epicenter. All right, so I'll go ahead and create a project. And now I have my electric bike company URL, but I put nothing in here, right? I don't have my model in yet. I have no interface. If I click on the link that I've created, I get the robot, and the robot says the page isn't available yet. So I need to actually create something before the simulation will actually work, of course. And if I look at this now, of course, you can see there's a model folder that's available in Epicenter, and it says no files found because I haven't put a model in it yet. And there's also an interface. So the interface is kind of separated from the model. And here we can see there's no files for the interface as well. So the first thing I need to do is put a model in here. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to, I've got this model.zip file for the Powersim model file, and I'm just going to drag it into my, my folder on the web page. So if I drag that in, it uploads the model for me. And so that's the model that I created that I showed you a moment ago that has those variables and has that output that I've shown a moment ago. Okay, so now that's in. And I still, though, have no interface that I've created. And what I can use for creating an interface is this interface builder tool. So this is kind of the top of the stack, the easiest way to build an interface in a few minutes. And like I said, there's other approaches as well that are available. So I'll click on the interface builder. And the interface builder, when I come into it, looks at the type of model that I've uploaded, and it makes some intelligent suggestions around what could be done with this model. And in this case, it's offering me 3 options. I can build a turn-by-turn based simulation, which would be a single-player turn-by-turn based game, essentially. I could do a multiplayer game in theory. I think actually, given the number of parameters that I put in here and things, it would probably be somewhat difficult to make a meaningful multiplayer game. Usually a multiplayer game would be bigger than what I've uploaded, but in theory, I could do that. So it's offering me that suggestion. And it's also offering the run comparison option, which would let me build, run the simulation out to the end and compare scenarios one to the other the way I did with the alternative fuel vehicle simulation. So for today, what I'm going to do is just do a turn-by-turn based game. And like I said, there's different approaches that can be built out of this. When we start into the user interface builder tool, what it does is it provides a set of templates kind of preloaded in a particular order that are suggestions for how you can design your interface. And you don't have to follow these. So what I have here, though, is an introduction page. So assuming I want to have an introduction page, I might want to have a dashboard that has dashboard results. And of course, there's nothing in here right now. I could have a report or multiple reports available and a decisions page. If I don't like those, or if I want to add other pages, I can do so by clicking the Add Page button. And what I get here are, a range of different types of pages that could be put in. Here's, output pages and graphs and tables. And I can what these are doing is providing me with sort of a basic structure for how these could be formatted. But there's, other ways of formatting them as well. I can have different input pages available. I have combination pages, different text pages, if I want to have those. And I can kind of combine these in different ways and repeat them to create an elaborate interface from here. And, so I can add these pages and then add them to the navigation that I have built in today. But for today, I think this is probably an okay place to start. And but I just kind of want to illustrate how all that works. So the first thing I probably want to do is create a project title that would exist across all these pages. So if I click on these pages, the project title kind of stays for every one of these. And the way I do that is I set the header and footer settings for it. So I can set the title here, and I'll call this, I think I'll call it Valencia Bicycle, and this is my electric bicycle company. And I also maybe want to have a logo, so let me go ahead and add a new image to create a logo for my company. And I, had before our webinar today, I uploaded a graphic file, so it's a little bike image here that I'm going to use. And so I have that, and then what I can do is kind of resize this to make it fit around the bike. So I, can decide what part of the image I actually want to use for display. So I'll go ahead and hit OK on there. And then now I can select that image to show. And if I go, and I can also put a copyright notice in here if I want to. If I say, well, this is something I created, I'll put, copyright Michael Bean. And I'll say, also I can put in a URL if I want to put a link to either a page about me, my CV or something, or a page to my website. I can do that. I'll say view more from Forio or something here. And now if I go to my intro page, you can see those things kind of filled in. So you can see here's the bicycle that I uploaded. Here's Valencia Bicycles. Here's my copyright notice and this view more from Forio link that's available. So that's what I've been able to add. And on the introductory page, I might also want to have, say, welcome to the bike simulation, for example. And I can also add some text here. Before we started the webinar today, I set up some text so I wouldn't have to, type a lot of text in here. So let me go ahead and show that to you. If I click here, I can put in this text, this kind of the introductory text about the simulation. So I've got something in here now. And I can even do things like add media in here. So if I want to put in, a link to some kind of image, if I want to have an image in here or even a video, let me put in a video link here. Then you can see, a picture here that's kind of introducing the simulation. So that looks good enough for me right now for kind of the introductory page for the simulation. Next, what I might want to do is show some output from my simulation here below. So I'm going to go ahead and do some of that right now. And what I'll do is click on a chart type, and you can see there are different chart types that are available for display. And I'll click on a line chart. And what I want to do, I guess, for my starting point here is maybe show total sales. So I'll put total sales up here. And if I go back, if I go back to my my simulation, I can see here's the total sales link that's available. This is the total sales variable that I might be able to plot here from my model. So let me show you that. So if I go here to data variables, I can click on variable, and one of the features of Epicenter is something called model introspection. And what it can do is look inside your Powersim model and identify variables that are there, and you can look them up. So if I start typing total, you can see it identifies the variable total sales that's available within my Powersim model. So if I click on that, then I see that total sales is available as something that can be plotted out over time. And so that's available in here right now. Let me create another graph. What I want to do is maybe a pie chart where I compare repurchases to new purchases. So I'm going to call this new versus repeat sales. And what I'll do with that is add two variables. I'll add my new sales variable. And that's not a very interesting pie chart right now. It's just all new sales. So I need to add another variable, and I'll put in repeat sales. And then now I have the two slices. So most of the market right now is new sales because it's kind of at the beginning of the simulation, but there could be more with repeat sales. And I can add additional pieces too. And these templates are meant to be guidelines, so they're not something that you necessarily need to follow exactly, but they provide sort of a nice framework for thinking about how you build your simulation. So notice here, for example, I have another chart that I could put in. I have these chart types that are available, but I can also choose a different component type. So let me click on choose a different component. And here, if I want to, I could put in a text component, and I could put in some text here to explain something about what's going on. So maybe I want to share something around, let me think, how about my installed base? I say your current installed base is, and I can use, if I want to embed numbers that appear in my simulation, I can do that by using these double curly brackets. I can do this, and I think the variable name I have for this is installed base. So let me go ahead and type that, installed base, and I can do the close. And there you can see the current installed base is 50,000, and I can put, a period at the end of that. I don't actually like the formatting of this right now, so I actually have this other capability, and this is kind of going into that next level a little bit of explaining how this all works, where I can do a pipe and then put a format in it. So I'll do pound, comma, pound, pound, 0. And you can see what that's done is format that as 50,000 with commas separated. And I could do that with dollar signs or euro signs or what have you if I want to. All right, so I think that's good enough for my dashboard interface. I'm going to skip the reports for now and then go on to decisions. And what I want to do is have some decision in my game for how I can control it. So let me click on that. And I have a bunch of different types of decisions that I can make that I can control my Powersim simulation with. So I can do radio buttons, checkboxes, toggles, sliders. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and use a slider, and I'm going to do, let's say, contacts per month here as my slider. So that's the what I control within my game, I guess. And again, I can use model introspection to look up the variable. If I type in contacts per month, I can see the variable name here. I can format it if I want to format it in certain ways. I can also type in my own formatting if I want to, and I can set the range on my slider. So if I want to say, well, I don't want the slider ever to go negative or even lower than 1, so I'm going to put a minimum of 1 on here. And I think the highest rational value for this might be 20 contacts per month, and then it should increment kind of in units of 1 exactly. So I'm going to put those in, and that's going to be my contacts per month for my game. Now I have down here on the bottom, it's providing me with the simulate button. And if I click on that button in this tool, what I can do is edit the behavior of the button. So the button has properties that are set up with it that allow me to control what the button does. And the first thing this button is stepping. So that's a good thing to do, right? I want to step the model forward a certain number of steps or increments. And I might want to have it advance more than 1. So what I'm going to do here is have it advance 10 steps for when I click this button. So every time I hit it, it's going to advance 10 steps at once. It's also going to save results from the simulation. And then it's going to navigate to the dashboard. So it'll do all 3 of these. And if I want to, I can add additional operations. I can add other things that it could do here in terms of clearing or saving or resetting and so forth. But I think actually for today, that's sufficient. Those 3 will work for me. And it's also linking to the right page right now for the dashboard, so it kind of sets this up in a reasonable way. And that's kind of enough to get started to create a very basic user interface. So let me go ahead and save this, and I'll go back to the introduction and now go to preview. So now I'm previewing what the interface looks like, and you can see a welcome to to the Valencia bicycle simulation with the picture. There's a little explanation here. I can watch the video if I want to, which I won't watch right now, but you can see it on here. I can look at the dashboard with some output. Now, this simulation is starting at time step 0, so it's not showing the total sales initially. But I can go to decisions here and then say, well, what would happen if I increase my contacts per month by a little bit and hit simulate? And now I'm starting to see some output where my total sales is growing over time. And if I go back to decisions maybe and lower this a little bit, say go down to 9 and hit simulate again, I get sort of the rest of the behavior. You see the little kink here that occurred because I changed the behavior kind of midway through. And you can see now it's dominated by repeat sales. And I can download these charts if I want and store them on my local drive if I want to save that picture and maybe use it in a PowerPoint presentation. And I can go back here too and reset my simulation. And if I go back here now and look at the dashboard, I'm back at the beginning again. All right, so I have a basic piece kind of working with this. The next thing I'd like to do with the interface is actually create a tool for letting a facilitator control this interface and run it for a class, kind of the way I showed a moment ago with the value proposition or the Harvard multiplayer game. And the way I can do that is by clicking on user interface and switching to facilitator interface. And so now it's providing me with a new template for setting up a facilitator interface, and it has kind of similar options on it. I'm going to take out the preview mode for here and then kind of get started on setting this up. The first thing I might want to do is set up a new header footer, and I'm going to call this facilitator Valencia bicycles. I have to type bicycles correctly. There we go. All right, and then I can use the header that I put on before. I can put the copyright notice in, and if I want, and so forth. But here's the thing, and it's sort of now more clearly indicating that this is the Valencia bicycles thing. And I can do fancier things here too. If I want to, I could change the theme if I want to use a different theme. And I can even edit those themes further. There's model settings that I can control for how it advances at the beginning and things like that. But I'm going to leave that alone for now. Another thing I can do here is look at class settings. And so now imagine that I have 30 or 50 people in a class, and I want to change the run for that group, for that class, every time I run it with them. I can do that through setting up class settings and having decisions that apply to every user within my class. So this is a way of kind of facilitating a group of users and changing everything for the entire group from run to run. And the way I can do that is by clicking on Set Decision Type now, and this time I'll use the text input decision. And I want to take something that's going to influence the simulation at the beginning, sort of initial value that I want to have it influence every decision that's run, going forward. And one of them that I have in this game is, or this model, is initial sales. So initial sales initializes the installed base, and it also has an impact on the remaining market. So that's something I can play with that might be a good way to, something that I might want to change as a facilitator. So I want to change this initial sales parameter. So I'm going to call this initial sales, or here. And then I'm going to select my variable. I start typing it, initial sales. I see it. And this also is 50,000. So I'm going to go ahead and, because that's the initial value for the installed base, I'm going to use the 1,000 separator for that. So I'm going to set that up this way. And that will allow me as a facilitator, or allow someone as a facilitator to change those values. Another thing that I might want to do is have class results and show how class results might change over time in the simulation for different users, and maybe add some values here for the simulation. So let me add a column here. I'm going to do this as, what's a good one? Maybe installed base. Right? So I'll put installed base in here. I'll select the variable installed base, and I'll format that with the 1,000 separator here. I don't see it in here right now because it only shows when it's actually running in the simulation. But what this is going to let me do is kind of create a kind of leaderboard, really, where I can look at all the students or learners or group in my class and kind of compare them to one another. All right, so I've got that set up. And that's kind of enough to get started with this, but you can also see it's kind of providing for me this ability to upload users and view users and things like that here. So let me go ahead and save that. And now what I want to do is go back to my project homepage. And you remember before I had my model set up. So I have my model file that I had uploaded a few minutes ago. And last time when we clicked on interface, it was an empty folder. But now it's been populated with HTML. And this HTML that's been created by the interface builder tool is editable if I want to. So I can go in here if I want to and actually change the HTML. So let me just quickly illustrate how that works. And that would be equivalent to kind of dropping down a layer to, saying I want to go beyond the templates tool and go into, editing things directly. And so, for example, on my decisions page, I can look at the HTML that's generated. And what's neat about this, one of the things we worked hard on, I guess, for this is to make sure that the HTML is reasonably clean. It's not kind of a, sometimes when machine generated HTML is created, it's very hard to read. It's not indented properly and things like that. But this is intended to be something that's reasonably easy to add. And you can see here, for example, this is the line that created the slider that I built earlier with the contacts per month. You can see it uses this framework. It says data-f-bind. So it's two-way binding to the Powersim model of contacts per month. And then it sets this, if I wanted to change this here to limit it to, say, only 15, maximum of 15 users, I could do that here. And I can also do things like change operations. Like what if instead of running it with 10 steps, I wanted it to run, let's say, 6 steps per round. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here too. Then I can save that, and that's going to actually update the interface and kind of limit things in different ways than I had set up before. So that's kind of what got generated for these interface files by the interface builder before. And what I want to do next is be able to create a class and have people run the simulation. That's a capability that's provided by this groups feature. And so I can create different groups that have access to my simulation. And the first step with groups is what I need to do is to add a group that would be like a class. And I might say, okay, I have a group coming up, let's say in May. And so I'm going to call this Michael's May class, simulation class or something. And this again is going to generate a URL for me. It's a bit confusing. It says May here and then it has April in here because it's looking at today's date for setting this up. So if I want to, I can edit this. I'm going to put in April here, or May, I guess, instead here. So that'll be good. Or actually, I'll just take that out. But you can see you can edit that. And it also sets a start date for access to the simulation, which is today. And then it sets an expiration, which is for October of this year, so 6 months out from today. And if I don't like that, if I don't want to ever limit it so that no one can stop using the simulation, I can set that group up so it's blank here and then it will never expire. But I can also do things like say, well, what if I want it to expire in a year or something like that, or in a week? Then I can use it as kind of a trial account. So I'm going to go ahead and create a group here. My group's created. And next, what I need to do is add end users. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the add end users because I want to attach some end users that will have access to my simulation for this group. And there's multiple ways of doing that. I have 3 ways actually that I can set that up. I can either add or invite people one by one here by typing in a name and then having it work that way. I can also download a template and then upload that template for users. So this is going to download an Excel template for me. Let me show you what that looks like. I'll just go ahead and download it. And what you can see here for the template is, it's just asking me some basic things. It's asking me the name, username, and password. So I enter that information in, and then I can upload that, and that's going to create a set of users for my class. And a third approach is to allow end users to self-register. So if I want to, I can create a self-registration page where I provide this link to end users or to students or what have you, and they can self-register and then have access to the simulation. So I can enable or disable self-registration. If I enable it, I can limit who is pre-approved to a list of users. So if I say, well, I want 10 people to self-register, but I don't really want anyone else to have access to my sim, you can provide a list of email addresses of people who are pre-approved to use the simulation. But for today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the simplest approach. I'm just going to upload a facilitator for this class. So let me go ahead and do that. So I'll do add invite user, and I'll put in a name. I'll say this is what is this game? It's electric bike FAC 1. So that'll be my my user here. And then I can put a name in. I'll put my own name in and a password and confirm. And then I have this choice between, do I want this to be a regular user or a facilitator? And in this case, I want this person to be a facilitator. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. And so now what you can see is I've got this electric bike user, the only user in this account right now who's able to use the simulation, kind of set things up. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And now what I'm going to do is run the simulation I created in an incognito window so I can kind of see how this looks and how it runs out over time. Okay, so here we have the login page. And I'm going to put in the name of my username and the password that I created. And now I'm logged in as the facilitator to the simulation. And I can see class results, and right now there are no class results in here. And class settings, if I want to change that, I can set that up. I can also view users, but there are no users in here yet. So the first thing I probably want to do is upload users. So in addition to being able to upload users through the Epicenter interface, you can have facilitators upload their own users, and you can do it through here. And the way they can do that, again, is through an Excel template where they copy and paste it in, or I can just type it in directly here. So I'm going to create, let's say, bike user 1, and I'll call this person A comma A, and their password I'll just keep as bike user 1 here. So that'll be a user in my account. And I could do another one if I want. I could do bike user 2, which would be B comma B, and bike user 2. And again, I'm just typing this in, but sort of a more efficient way to do this in non-demo circumstances would be to use that Excel template to create that. But let me go ahead and upload users now. And it's saying that following users were created correctly or successfully created. So that's done. If I go to view users now, I can see now I have 2 users in that have these 2 names in it, but I still don't have any class results. So now let me go back and log out, and I'm going to log in as one of these users that I just created. So I'm logging into the simulation. It says welcome, and now what I have now, instead of the faculty view or facilitator view, I have the student or user view here. I can go to the dashboard and see results. I can make decisions, and I'll kind of drag this around. I'm going to do a really low contacts per month and run this out a few steps. You can see now it runs only 6 months per decision because I made that change. So I'll go ahead and run this out again, and I think it runs to 24. No, one more, I guess. Okay, yeah, so I have 4 steps in this game with the 6. Okay, so now I'm at the end. You can kind of see what's happened over time. So that's my run. That's one result. Let me go back now. I'm going to reset the simulation, and I'm going to do another one where I slightly increase my contacts per month, and I'll run this out a few steps. So I'll do this, and this will kind of create different outcomes to the game here. So now we'll get kind of to the end of the diffusion, closer to the end anyway of the diffusion curve here. So let me go back to decisions, do it one more time. Okay, so now we're at the end, and you can see the total sales kind of played out, and it's played out more so than it did when I had lower contacts. And in fact, everything now is repeat sales. So that's sort of interesting. Okay, so now let me go ahead and log out again. And now I have to remind myself what the login is for this. Okay, so it's electric bike FAQ. That was what I created. So let me put that back. I'll log back in as the facilitator. And now if I go to class results, I can see there are a couple class results that are available. It's for user AA who ran it twice, and they had different levels of installed base because I set that up here. And I can even go back now if I want to view that particular user. I can click on view, and it's going to show me that final result that I had for that particular user over time. So this is that final result that was available for that particular user, and I can get out of this again and kind of go into different places. But that's kind of the basics of getting it set up. So what we've covered today during the webinar are some basic features for creating an interface with a Powersim model. And you can, like I showed, upload your Powersim model by dragging it into the model folder, and then create different styles of interfaces depending on what you're doing, either a scenario comparison or run comparison simulation, a turn-based game like we built today with a facilitator interface, or even a multiplayer simulation. There's options here for creating groups, where in this case we created this hypothetical group, which now has 3 users in it, 1 facilitator and 2 students. And I can even add additional groups in here if I want to. If I have another class that's running either simultaneously or another time, I can say there's a June class here. I can do that and create another group around that. And then, I can add additional users to my June class if I want, and kind of have them have separate access from the other group. And then finally, there are settings that are available for kind of controlling your simulation, determining whether or not what the access is and things like that. And this kind of gets built up from scratch. Lastly, just kind of, some last little features that are available is you have this ability to download your entire project. So you can download every file that was created, both the Powersim model that you used, as well as the interface files that were generated, and save them to your local drive if you want. You can also, you don't have to use the web interface for uploading and downloading stuff. You can also use SFTP, and this provides information about how to set up an SFTP client for communicating that way. All right, we did want to leave a few minutes at the end here for questions today. So if any of you have any questions about what we've shared, feel free to ask them now, and if not, we can wrap up our webinar. Amrita, and I haven't mentioned this at the beginning, but my colleague Amrita has been sitting with me through the webinar today, and if there are any questions that have come up from the interface, please let me know. What is the pricing for these to build out the simulation? So Amrita says the question is, what is the pricing for building out a simulation in Epicenter? So let me go ahead and share that with you. I think the easiest way to get to that is if you go to our website, go to forio.com, and if you go from here to products, you'll see Epicenter at the top, and you can click on Epicenter, and then down below here you'll see the pricing page. So if you click on that, you can see pricing for Epicenter, and it starts at $477 US per year and goes up to about $10,000 per year. There's also enterprise licensing if you want to install it on your local servers and things like that, but this is for the hosted version, which allows you to both author the simulation and it manages hosting for you, as we've shown today. And the key differences between these, or among these different prices here, has to do with the number of simulations that you can have within them. So it goes from 1 to 25, and the number of end users that have access to your authenticated projects. So you saw, for example, in the example I built today, that there were 3 end users, 1 facilitator and 2 students essentially that had access to the simulation. So that would count as 3. And here, for the smallest one, you'd have 40 people could have access, and it'd go up to as high as 5,000 or even more if you use an enterprise license. All right, anything else, Amrita? That's it for today. All right, very good. Well, thanks to everyone, and have a good day. Bye-bye.